Welcome back to the Defensemen Hockey Podcast. James Nichols of the Fourth Period here, as always. And with me, as always, is John Zella. What's up, pal?
Not a whole lot. Excited for the interview with Dave today. Excited for you all to hear it. We had a good conversation. Some surprises. We'll talk about it on the other side. But definitely worth a listen ahead of the draft, free agency, trades heating up, things that have already happened, and kind of constant breaking news as we get closer to true silly season.
Yeah, I was definitely with you on some of the surprising things there. We'll see what happens. The draft is just 2 days away. The Islanders may or may not be players in some things. So it'll be exciting. And I think with that, we'll just get right to it. And we hope you enjoy our interview with the Fourth Period's David Pagnotta. We're happy to welcome back the editor-in-chief of the Fourth Period and NHL insider on NHL Network, David Pagnotta. Thanks for joining us today, Dave.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
All right, so let's get down to it. The draft is Thursday. We're getting close. And the Islanders have the 13th overall pick, the first round draft pick they've had in a couple of years. The question is, do they use it to draft, or do you think it's going to be on the move?
I think there's a willingness to listen. How realistic it is, I honestly don't know if they would ultimately move it. But I think it would take something fairly significant in order for them to pull something off, like bringing a guy who can score, who can put up points, that's controllable for the foreseeable future. Otherwise, I think Lou and the staff would hold on to that, as you said, first round pick in a little while. So I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of holds on to it. But again, we get to this point in time, craziness kind of happens. You never know. I'm not going to discount it, but barring that, I think the Owls stick with a 13th pick, unless they move up or down in some fashion. But I think they draft in the first round.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Like, we'll talk about players who they could be after in a little while, but first I want to start with talking about the Islanders players first, who we have mentioned via the Fourth Period, who could be available, who's being actively shopped, and we reported yesterday that both Josh Bailey and Semyon Varlamov are being actively shopped. The first question I have for you there is in regards to Josh Bailey.
Yeah.
John and I in Islander country get a lot of, Josh Bailey has no value. Nobody would want him. What are your thoughts on Josh Bailey and his value?
He brings other intangibles and other elements to his game. First of all, the guys love him. He's a great room guy. He's kind of one of those glue guys that keeps everybody in check and everybody together, which is certainly valuable to a lot of teams. His on ice production has not been, where it could be, and it may have slipped over the last couple of years. But I still think there's some level of value there. I mean, it just depends on what teams are looking for, and how that works out. If the Islanders end up moving him, I mean, there are a variety of different options. It's either a clear cut, kind of move, or it's something similar to what the Lightning did, where you move out Ryan McDonagh at $6.25 million, and you bring back a guy who's in the 2 range or something like that, basically to free up a little additional cap space, to give yourself that extra buffer, which I think is something that is being discussed from what I'm hearing. So I mean, ultimately we'll see. This isn't going to be a hockey type trade where, if it does happen, where you're moving out Bailey and you're bringing in a guy to replace him immediately. That's not in the cards in this scenario, but they're listening. They've made it known that he's out there, that he's available. So if the right deal comes across Lou's desk, I'm sure he will try to make that happen.
Do you think there'd be any interest from the Dallas Stars? You had recently, and I say recently, as of like 30 minutes before we recorded, you had tweeted that they were looking for a top 6 forward, possibly to kind of play on that top line with Sagan and Ben. Bailey is a playmaker, puck mover. What would return be for a Bailey in this situation? And do you think Dallas has any interest? This is, pure speculation. Obviously, you tweeted that a few minutes ago.
Right. Yeah. Other than I know there were some, Seattle, Arizona talks. If they've gotten anywhere, I don't know at this point, and I don't know what legitimately other teams are in the mix. So, in terms of Dallas, I don't know if that's exactly the type of guy. I think they want somebody more with more of an offensive flair, because they're basically looking for somebody to play with Seguin and Benn. I'm expecting a resurgence season from Tyler Seguin now that he's fully healthy. Next season, Jamie Benn, I have honestly no freaking idea. For his sake, I hope, and for Star's sakes, and their fan base, I hope that he kind of gets back on the upswing. But they want somebody on the other side of that wing that can put the puck in the net, that can kind of complement what Seguin and Benn can bring. So I don't know if Josh Bailey is that fit. He may, wherever he ends up, and it may ultimately stick with the Isles. He's that middle six role. He's hot. You move him up to the second. He cools down a little bit. You throw him on the third, and you kind of go from there and hope the other elements of his game kind of pay off. The return is not, again, it's not going to be anything significant. I look to that McDonough deal. You got a player that's probably going to, if it does end up being that way and they're taking back a little bit of money, it's a lower tier player, and it's a kid that may or may not pan out. More likely not, but, with all due respect to those kinds of players.
Sure, for sure. All right, let's move on to Varlamov, and we were talking, you and I were talking before a little bit about how there was known conflicting reports here. What are you hearing about Semyon Varlamov?
Yeah, there's nothing to be conflicted about. He's available. If, again, just like Bailey, if the right deal comes across, if they end up moving him out, they're obviously going to need a backup. So that, all of that's part of the equation for the Islanders. But I know there have been discussions going back into the season. Obviously, nothing to this point has tickled Lou's fancy. So he'll sit back and wait. But again, him and Bailey are both available. Teams know it. Is anything close at this point? I honestly don't know. It doesn't sound like it, but if the right deal comes across, I don't think there would be a hesitation on the Isles' part to move him.
Now, this might not be something that you can answer just based on the current state of the world right now, but there's a situation going on in Russia where there are there's the unknown really with if players are going to return. I don't know the whereabouts of Semyon Varlamov right now, but Ilya Sorokin is in Moscow. Could that possibly affect negotiations for a Varlamov? Barring the possibility, Sorokin can't return from Moscow where he currently is.
It doesn't sound like that's much of an issue, and I don't know the full parameters and scope of that.
Right.
Everything going on over there. It does. Certain situations, certain stories sound pretty nuts and wild, but I'm not going to pretend that I know exactly what the heck's going to happen. The sense that I've gotten from a lot of Russian players that have gone back is there would be a lot of shock if they can't leave the country. Some really bad stuff would have to happen within that war to prevent that from happening. So I don't think there's much worry across the league in terms of their guys not being able to come back. I know the Philly situation with their young goalie is it's a bit of a different dynamic. But I don't really get the sense from anybody that there's going to be an issue there.
Let's talk Anthony Beauvillier. He is probably the most intriguing trade chip, if you will, if they decide to trade him. What are you hearing about Anthony Beauvillier?
He's a kind of player, and I'm sure there are others, that if the right hockey deal comes into play, talent for talent kind of swap package for an upgrade, that the Isles would look at that. Definitely. I'm sure there have been, and I know there have been some discussions already with teams kind of poking around to see how they can pry him. Can they, is it going to take a draft pick? No, that's not what the Isles want. As much as they'd love to clear out some salary and create a little additional cap space, I don't get the sense that they want to just get rid of the guy for picks. If he's moved, it's probably in a larger type deal that helps the Islanders now and would be an upgrade over him. So Other than that, I don't really get the sense that they want to move him. Like they feel, okay, time's run out on the island and we'll move on. But he's another player that is available, different circumstances than the other two guys. But it would just be, from my understanding, in an upgrade type of scenario.
Yeah, I figured that. I mean, he's young. He obviously has the talent. He has the skill. So it would be one of those deals, right, where you're
Right.
giving to get as well. It's not one of those cap dump situations where it could be with Bailey or Varlamov.
Right. And the interest and the thing here that I will preface, because I mean, things change all the time. And I mean, I'm not going to pretend I know exactly what the heck's going on in any front office. But we could, if this drags on, as in if we don't see any type of trade or movement from a roster side of things until free agency starts, then that's where parameters of deals may change, not just for the Islanders, but for other teams. So if a team like the Islanders, we'll use them as the example, go out and sign a big ticket free agent, then that's where, moving out that type of a player may change in terms of what the return may be. But, barring that, it would be from an upgrade side of things.
All right, so there is a couple of Islander players who will be due for extensions.
Yep.
One this summer, and then one who can sign now, but not until next summer will his contract be up. But we'll start with Noah Dobson. Any indication there on if there's been contract talks yet?
I think so. What I've gotten on that, and I know offline we chatted about this earlier in the week, or a couple days ago, whatever it is. My schedule's all, I don't know what day it is. I figured out it was Tuesday about 2 hours ago.
Life of an insider.
My understanding with that circumstances, it's preliminary, as of a day or day and a half ago, unless things have really ramped up. I mean, there's no immediate sense of urgency to this point. I think the focus is draft, and whatever tinkering they may do. But I mean, I don't think there's going to be an issue there with respect to Dobson. I can't imagine the Islanders would think of that either. That they'll get that settled up in short order. I would think after this week kind of gets going, they're going to try to firm things up there. But I think to this point, we're at least what I'm being told is it's very, very preliminary.
In terms of the structure and what it might look like, would you say it's going to be a bridge, or do they want to, or are they going to try to lock him up long term?
I think they'd want to try to lock him up long term, which may result in them coming at him with a smaller deal. He's only 22, so you don't necessarily have to. I mean, from his side of things, he could try to say, "Give me a 3-year deal, and we'll explore it later on." He'll still be controllable by the team. And then, kind of go from there. If he continues to trend upwards, it's certainly a gamble on both sides, because if he doesn't, then he may lose out on dollars. If he does, and the Isles accept a shorter term deal, we'll be prepared to kind of pay up later on. Now, the other factor here is that by the 24-25 season, the salary cap is expected to jump. This coming season, it's 82.5. Season after that, it's 83.5. 23-24 supposed to be, or 24-20, I can't remember. Anyway, this season's $1 million. Next season is going to be an additional $1 million. Season after that is supposed to be $1 million. And then around that time, if all of the money is recouped by the NHL from the NHLPA because of everything that's gone on with the CBA, all that fun stuff, then we could see an incline of the cap, going well over 90 million in the first period, and then the year after that, considerably more. So all of that's going to be factored into for a number of teams. So for teams that have players in this position that are 22, that don't see unrestricted free agency for, let's say, 3-4 seasons, they may, from an agent side, and even certain teams may decide, okay, let's just do a deal up until that period. You still be controllable. You still be an RFA. It might be the last year of them being an RFA. And then you go for the bigger deal later, because you know exactly how the cap at that point is really going to incline. So just another little element that teams have to factor in when they're negotiating, and the same with agents, because it may be in a player's best interest to take a shorter term deal, wait until there's stability with the salary cap. Let's say first year it's 92, and then after that it's 95, and the year after that it's 101. then it may be more beneficial to the player to cash in really on the next deal after this one.
Yeah, that makes total sense, and you wonder if that's something going through the mind of Noah Dobson right now, because this next player doesn't have that luxury. He's a little bit ahead of the window of Dobson, and that's Mathew Barzal. Obviously, he doesn't
Yeah.
have to get anything done right now. He has the opportunity to wait out the season, kind of bet on himself, really, because he didn't have that great of a year. Um, but he could sign a contract if he wanted to right now. He was pretty outspoken about how much he did enjoy playing for the Islanders, living on Long Island. And he was straight to the point. He said, "I don't want to be anywhere else. This is where I want to play. I would love to
Yeah.
sign long term here." Um, does Lamoriello jump on that early? Any indication if he's tried? Will he and his camp be willing to listen to signing an extension now? It's not completely out of the realm of possibility regarding Lamoriello, right? He just did it with Ryan Pulock in
Yeah.
October. He was supposed to be a UFA right now, but he got that one locked up early. 8-year deal for Pulock. Does he do the same for Mathew Barzal?
Look, I wouldn't be surprised. I haven't heard one way or another if there's a plan to start that process yet. But again, look, he'll be 26. It'll be his last year of RFA status, so there is a buffer. They could wait until the start of the season. They could explore it in the season. I don't get the sense that there's any urgency now to do this by the time July 13th rolls around. Conversely, and with as examples elsewhere, Nathan MacKinnon, last year of his deal coming up, Jonathan Huberdeau, last year of his deal coming up. I believe that they're going to start discussions, if they haven't already, this week with those teams and their respective players and agents. Here, I don't really sense any type of urgency on either side, from his camp or from the Isles. So, I mean, they could certainly, and there's definitely a benefit to it because, peace of mind, it's done. Your cap situation moving forward. You eliminate any type of risk of him saying, no, I'm going to wait till next offseason, where he's arbitration eligible. So all of those kind of things kind of factor in. But I think they'll get to it when they get to it. I don't want to give a cop-out answer, but I don't think there's any concern on either side because you're right. He loves it on the island. He loves playing for the Islanders. He loves being a part of that group. I would be surprised if there are any significant difficulties in trying to get something done. When push comes to shove, obviously his last deal, there was a little bit of stress, but I don't know if it's going to get to that point on the next one.
Now, the question I have about, players and them getting traded and everything, Anthony Beauvillier is known to be pretty close to Mathew Barzal. Some have asked and wondered, would trading an Anthony Beauvillier sour Mathew Barzal's perception of wanting to stay with the Islanders? Is that something that these players understand? It's a business decision,
Yeah.
or would something like that make him feel like he doesn't want to stay with the Islanders because they decided to move on from an Anthony Beauvillier?
Unless they treated Beauvillier or somebody else like total crap, I don't think that plays much of a factor for anybody anymore. Everyone understands it's a business. Everybody understands anyone could get traded at any given point. It's not ideal. It's not what teams want to do in a lot of circumstances. Like Tampa didn't want to trade Ryan McDonagh,
Sure.
but for the betterment of the team, they had to. So I don't think that's really much of an issue. Again, unless the situation is completely soured and it spreads into the room, but that's a whole other situation. I don't really get that sense. These things are easily accessible. He can call him and FaceTime him and text him whenever he wants if he's not there.
Yeah, sure. Makes total sense. I had that same inkling. But those comments are always thrown around. Oh, he's his best friend. And to that I would say, well, look at Jordan Eberle. They were pretty close too, and he moved on,
Right.
and he was still pretty happy with where he is. But all right, I think it's time we move on to those outside of the Islander organization who have been connected and linked to the Islander organization. And where else should we start but with Alex DeBrincat? Are the Islanders going to actually be players in this market for the former or two-time 40-goal scorer?
I think they've inquired. I think they were part of it. I think the price is too high.
Okay.
That's kind of the sense that I've gotten. I mean, barring some significant change, he's what they want. He's what a lot of teams want, but I don't get the sense that um, right now that's realistic. I mean, look, things can change. Obviously, I want to preface that,
Yeah.
but I just don't. I just don't get the sense that the Owls are part of that. I think there are other teams that want to be part of it. I know Philly tried. Um, they're going to hold on to the 5th overall pick at least for now. Um, we'll see kind of if things change in the next 48 hours, but that's their mindset right now. Um, LA was part of that. They obviously got Kevin Fiala. I know Seattle's kind of knocked on the door. Anaheim's kicked some tires. There are other teams out there that really like this player. It's just a matter of paying a premium. If you want a kid that's 25, that's played 5 years in the league, and already has 2 40-goal seasons, it's going to cost you. So you just got to be, you got to evaluate and decide if the juice is worth the squeeze. And for some teams, yes, and for some teams, no.
Yeah, you wonder if the Islanders and Lamoriello would be able to pony up enough to get an Alex DeBrincat because not too long ago in those same exit interviews, Barzell was talking about how he styles his game after two guys, and one of those guys was Patrick Kane. And who does Alex
Yeah.
DeBrincat play with? Alex DeBrincat plays with Patrick Kane, so you already know that combo right there, the duo of DeBrincat and Barzell, would do some damage. So he is essentially exactly what you're looking for. The age fits, the need fits,
Yeah.
and everything. So he is your really should be at the top of the list. But like you said, that the price is probably too much, right? I think they already
Yeah.
turned down an offer of 2 first-round draft picks plus.
Yeah. I don't know if that was, I want to say Elliot Friedman. I don't know. It might have been Friedman, might have been someone else that reported that. Um, and that just goes to show you how high the price is. Now, it could have also just been 2 first-round picks.
Sure.
Like Buffalo, for example, has 3. They could have offered up the 16th and the 20 whatever, and Chicago would have said no, and I don't blame them.
Right.
But I don't know if there was more to it, but it would take. So my understanding of what the asking price is 3 to 4 assets, a first-round pick, a young, proven, controllable NHL talent, and a high-end prospect. That's the minimum. Or whatever the equivalent is. Like it could be 2 first-round picks and one of those other 2 things, and then maybe another asset depending on what the overall package is of the primary 3. But I mean, that's what you're looking at. And from the Islanders side of things, I mean, they've got the first-round pick. Maybe they got a prospect that Chicago is interested in. I don't know if they have the young. I mean, they're not trading Noah Dobson, so. It would basically take Noah Dobson plus probably the first and maybe something else to at least get to the table or the dance floor. I don't know. I don't see that happening.
And Beauvillier is not that player.
No, it would take more. Like I think it would take. Well, if Dobson's out, yeah, it definitely would not be Beauvillier at first and another. Even if it's their top prospect. Yeah. I don't think that's nearly enough.
Yeah, that's a big price to pay, and you're essentially wiping out your prospect pool, and you're losing one of your best players, and so it's definitely tough to pay up that price.
Like from Anaheim's perspective, this is a team that is a little good, and they're going to be because Pat Verbeek falls under the Steve Yzerman.
Sure.
Rule of keeping everything close to the vest, which Islander fans definitely can appreciate. But they're an interesting one for me. They're always kind of lurking now, and they have the 10th overall pick. I believe they'll trade it if the right deal comes. They're shopping guys like Max Comtois, who had a really bad season, but a hell of a season the year before, and he's controllable. And they've got some other really good young prospects. So I don't know if they're anywhere near close to making something happen, but it would not shock me if a team like the Ducks kind of came to play.
Yeah, sending him out as far west as he can go would probably be a good idea for Chicago. Another player that I was actually surprised to see this name pop up on the Islanders' radar, but JT Miller from Vancouver. We know that Vancouver has been trying to figure out if they're going to keep him or if they're going to move on from him. You had him linked to the Islanders. What do you what do you see there?
Yeah, I mean, I think all three New York area teams have had some type of discussion at some point. Rangers and Devils definitely like the guy. The Islanders, from what I had heard out of Vancouver, was that there's been some type of discussion with the Isles. Again, whether it's close or not, I'm not too sure. But that's a scenario where I think Beauvillier might make sense as part of the package there. Probably, and this is just my guess, him, that first round pick, and probably another asset. But, if you're giving up a premium and people keep linking New Jersey in the second overall pick for JT Miller, I don't think that's going to happen. Yeah, unless Montreal takes Slavkovsky first and Jersey's got Shane Wright for their picking, then I think it changes things. And I think that's also what Jersey's waiting for, is to see what the hell the Habs actually do. Because they keep saying they haven't made up their mind. I think that's BS. I think they have. I don't know who it is. It's either Slavkovsky or Wright. But I think Jersey's kind of waiting there. And that'll kind of dictate what they end up doing. But it's going to be a hell of a price for that guy. But I think anybody that's paying that premium wants to know if they have a shot at retaining him long term. You're not paying that price for 1 year of JT Miller. So it makes things a little difficult. They need permission to either talk to the agent, and obviously they can't sign anything until the 13th, so it could be a bit of a handshake agreement with any team if he ends up being moved for a significant package. Or they lay out everything on the table and they say, here's an affidavit basically from the agent to say, here's what they want. They would consider your team rather than giving them permission to actually negotiate. So all of that kind of might play a factor here for any team that is really high on JT Miller and pays a hell of a price for him, because I just don't see any team give it the Devils, even if Slavkovsky goes to the Habs, you're going to trade Shane Wright for 1 year of JT Miller? I don't see it.
Yeah, it sounds more like if the price stays that high, the Canucks are going to hang on to JT Miller. I can't see them being able to move him with that ask.
It's really going to come down to whether they think they can sign him or not. And I think we'll know that by whatever time it is now, a little later than that, by tomorrow night. Okay. By Wednesday night, the day before the draft, I think we'll get an indication as to whether or not, or at least they will. They may not be public, but sure. If not sooner, I think that's a bit of a deadline for them to know by end of day Wednesday, the day before the draft. We need to know if you're going to be able to sign here long term. If not, we got to figure out other alternatives.
So now we know that there's a deficit for the Islanders on their blue line, right? They signed Zdeno Chara. They had Andy Green on the in their top six. Those two guys, Chara hasn't closed the door on returning. I can't see it being with the Islanders. I don't know about you. Either way, the statement from Lamoriello was he wants to find more offense from his defense, and he wants to improve the blue line. The first player on our summer watch list is Jakob Chychrun. The Islanders aren't linked to him. Are they out on Jakob Chychrun?
Think the DeBrincat package, same deal for Jakob Chychrun. So no, I don't think they're part of it. Again, unless for whatever reason they decide to trade Dobson, I don't even think they get to the table on that one. So
it doesn't really make sense.
No, right, exactly. So I'd be very shocked if they found a way to make it work, and full applause if they can. I don't see it right now.
So that brings me to the question: trade route, defenseman on the left side. Who do the Islanders turn to? What options are there? Just because again, Lamoriello wants to improve that spot next to Dobson. How can they do that?
Yeah, there's not many left shot defensemen that are available. If they want somebody on the right side, they've got that. There are a lot of right shot defensemen that are available, but if they want left side, Marcus Pettersson out of Pitt, and I don't think they're going to trade in division. And he's not a first pair guy. They'd have to get really creative and try to make something happen. Now, they may wait for free agency, but there aren't any top tier left shot defensemen that are available either, unless they circle back on a guy like Nick Leddy, which I think they might. If he hits the open market, and presumably he will. I know St. Louis liked him, but I think he's going to test. So we'll see. They'd have to get creative. Off the top of my head, I'm trying to think here, and I was checking a couple notes. I don't know any top tier left side defensemen that are fully available. Now, Ben Sherratt shoots right. He plays both sides. I think he shoots right. Anyway, I know he plays both sides. But I mean, maybe that's an option if they go the free agent route. But from an offensive standpoint, that's not really the type of defenseman you're looking for. So it would take a lot of digging from the Islanders to see where they can pry somebody out of in a different market.
Now, I know John has this name queued up and highlighted in our notes over here. You want to take that question, bud?
It's quite all right. You can go for it.
So Vince Dunn out of Seattle. His name has constantly been thrown around. Islander fans are really crave this player. Is there any possibility that Seattle decides that they would trade a guy like Vince Dunn, and is he a solution in a top 4 pairing?
I think he would be certainly a solid fit. Controllable again. He's I think he's got 1 year left. He's an RFA after that still. He would make sense. And I think former team, Seattle, would definitely listen on him. They'd listen on almost everybody at this point, other than Beniers. But I mean, look, if I'm the Isles and I'm looking around, absolutely I would call Ron Francis and say, hey, what's the price tag on Vince Dunn? He's not untouchable by any stretch. He's available. He also plays both sides. But in terms of a relatively young option on the left side, yeah, Vince Dunn would make sense, certainly. Package wise, I have no idea. I know they're looking for upgrades in the first and second line on the wings specifically. Maybe that's a Beauvillier fit, but we'll have to wait and see. But I don't think, I would be surprised if they haven't at least inquired. Because he's a player that makes a lot of sense for him and for a lot of teams. Because again, there aren't that many left shot defensemen available in free agency and readily available on the trade market. So it would make sense for them and a few other teams that need one of those guys to inquire.
So 2 other guys that I've actually spoken to you about off the air. Oliver Shillington, if the Calgary Flames want to retain Johnny Gaudreau, can they afford to keep Oliver Shillington and sign Andrew Mangiapane and Matthew Tkachuk and all the players that they really have to bring back?
Right.
Or is there any possibility at all that Shillington could be on the move if they do decide they want to keep both Tkachuk and Gaudreau while also trying to retain Mangiapane?
I think what Calgary needs to figure out is the health status of Sean Monahan. Who had surgery. Is he going to be available this season? When can he come back? If he is going to come back, they need to make sure they've got the cap space for him. If he is going to come back as well, that also allows them to trade him with 1 year left on his deal. So unless a team is looking to throw somebody on LTIR for another season, I'm sure there's going to be teams that would do that.
Right.
They got to figure out as they're kind of waiting for Gaudreau to come back to them with an offer, or not come back, but accept or decline their offer, as they try to maneuver negotiations with Tkachuk and Mangiapane and Shillington. The Monahan situation is kind of hanging over them. So they got to figure that out. And they may have internally and haven't told anybody, but that's a key for them in terms of piecing their team together. If they're stuck, then they start exploring those opportunities and you go to teams and say, hey, well, listen, try to wow us. Teams will know they're a little stuck, so they may not go fully wow, but I mean, it's possible. They like him. They want to hold on to him. But if they get backed into a corner, that's when a guy like that might become available.
It's a shame, too, because they could have had him for nothing and claimed him off of waivers last summer if they really wanted to. So, and another player that I think of on the blue line, and a team that's in a far different situation than Calgary regarding their cap situation is the Vegas Golden Knights.
Yep.
They have a bunch of defensemen under contract already. They have one defenseman who's an RFA who was sidelined due to injury in Nicholas Hague. I've been told that it doesn't really make too much sense for the Golden Knights to try and move on from Hague, but would they be inclined to maybe moving him in the case that they don't get any takers for an Alec Martinez or someone of that matter?
Yeah, I think Marty's the guy they're going to try to move if they do. They really like Nick Hague. So I think that would be a last resort scenario. They're an interesting situation because I haven't put this out there yet. I will in a little bit, but their goaltending situation is a little murky.
Uh-oh.
Both of their goalies right now are not going to be ready for the start of the season, as they are on the mend from their injuries. And
are we breaking news right now?
Surgery. Yeah, I haven't put that out. I don't know if it's out there. I haven't seen it, but I haven't tweeted this yet, or really said it anywhere. But they got to figure that out. So they're in the market for a goalie, short term. Forget about Varley. It's short term. They need somebody to at least be there for the first month of the season, and then then it's accept the fact that you might be in the A for the rest of it.
Right.
But that's an interesting situation for them because if there is any setback on anybody, specifically Leonard, for example, then it gives them a little bit of wiggle room cap-wise, at least for the first month of the season. If they want it to come back, they're going to have to create the space in order for that player to come back, but it might give them a little bit more flexibility later on. So there's not an immediate sense of urgency from Vegas to clear up cap space now. Another note for every team out there, you can exceed the cap by 10% over the offseason. You have to be compliant for day one of the season or the day before. I think it changed to the day before. But anyway, you have time. There's a buffer. So for Vegas, they can sit back and wait and maybe wait until training camp starts in September before they decide what they want to do there in terms of giving themselves additional cap flexibility.
All right, it's time to talk about the free agent market.
Right.
The names that everybody's been, crying over and begging for. And we named him already. We're going to start with Johnny Gaudreau. Are the Islanders going to be players for Johnny Gaudreau if he hits the free agent market? We've seen Lamoriello throw the bag at big name players like this before, back in 2019 with Artemi Panarin. Yep. Is this the same kind of situation for Johnny Gaudreau? Is Lamoriello going to be throwing a bag at Johnny Gaudreau?
I don't think it would be as much as Panarin. I don't get that sense. Unless something changes in the next 10 days and or less, I guess at this point, 8 days. And Johnny's available still, then maybe that changes. But I don't get the sense that they're going to throw $10.5 million his way. That's not what I'm hearing right now anyway. He's got an offer on the table from Calgary that's around $76 million over 8 years. I think it's a little over that, but that's kind of the number. So if he's looking for the equivalent on a 7-year deal, it's just over $10.8 million a year. It's a big price to go that long on. So you better make sure you've got the cap space to pull that off, not just this coming season, but the season after that and so on. So it's going to be interesting. Now the other thing too, if he doesn't accept this deal from Calgary by July 12th at 11:59:59, and it's filed with the league by then he can only sign a 7-year deal with any team, including Calgary. So if he wants those big bucks, unless he knows or his agent knows that he can get that type of money elsewhere, then he may stay. The other factor in all of this is the tax situation. So he may get 76 mil, but after taxes, what's he taking home?
Right.
And it may be more in a market that either has, a tax-free state or their tax percentage is significantly lower. the overall outcome, he may net a little bit more after taxes in another market. Now, if that's only what he's looking for, then maybe he waits and see what's out there, and if one of those teams kind of come calling. But I know he wants to win. I know the environment within the city and the team nucleus is important to him, not just from a competition perspective, but from a family side of things. So, young family, just starting out, all that fun stuff. They really like Calgary from that perspective. But is there another environment that works for them, that is similar, if not better, that fits financially, all that stuff? That's kind of what he has to weigh out. And I know Calgary would like an answer like yesterday, but they just haven't had it yet.
Yeah, I mean, all of those factors minus the tax situation does sound like Long Island. But the tax situation for sure in New York is something that makes the choice a little easier in not picking a New York team when it comes to signing with
Right.
any New York area.
And if it's strictly money, he'd net a little bit more in Calgary, I believe.
Yeah.
Because some tax benefits, American citizen, all that stuff. But it's not significant enough for him to say, I have to pick Calgary just from a dollar side of things over, a New York team.
Is the tax situation really that big of a deal? I forget where I heard it, and from a couple different people. Isn't it more about like, your financial advisor really helping you through that process and taxes? Because it's very complicated. It's not like
Yes.
you make New York money. There's the jock tax, and I know there's
Right.
agent
Exactly.
fees and this and that, and there's a lot of things that we don't know that
Yep.
it costs as a player, but it's a lot about just who's advising you on your funds. Is that a lot of it?
That factors into the negotiation, and a lot of that is available prior. So he should have all of that information available to him already, in terms of what teams, what the tax brackets are in each of the markets, how that jock tax factors in, depending on where he plays, where he ends up. He better know what his agent percentage is. But around the league, it ranges depending on player, depending on money. It could be 0.5%, anywhere from that to 3% is usually, 1 to 3% is usually the average gap. Some are considerably, some of them are 0.5%, which are usually the top echelon guys, and some are a little bit more. Does he pay additional fees with respect to his financial advisor? Does he have a marketing guide? Does he have a concierge service? Does he have all that? All that stuff should be already in his hands, so he knows exactly where he signs, where that final dollar amount is going to be. Again, it's not overly important to everybody. It's a factor, and there is certainly some importance, because if you're making, $9.5 million in Calgary, and another team's offering you $7 million, well, that factors in. And even if it is a tax-free market, how much more are you losing? Is it all of that stuff comes into play for a lot of these guys. Living expenses, that also factors in. You may be able to pull off $4 or $5 grand a month in one city, and you may not be able to scratch the surface with that money in another. It may cost 10, 15, 20 a month, depending on exactly what your needs are, what you're looking for, schools, all of that stuff. Not just for John, but for a lot of the key free agents and for almost everyone. All of that stuff should be already available to them by this point. And all of that kind of plays a factor as well.
Yeah, a lot of people forget about the humane side of the business, and that's
Right.
definitely a big factor for a lot of these guys, including Filip Forsberg, who is another player, might be the second hottest player on the possible UFA market if he does end up getting there. We know that you've spoken about how they're grinding away at a deal. There's an
Yep.
8-year offer on the table, and the difference between sides is just under $1 million, if I'm not mistaken. Does this happen with Nashville, or does he make it to free agency? And if he does, are the Islanders similarly to Gaudreau going to be players?
I think the gap is smaller now. I think he stays. I talked to a couple people in Nashville actually today. They seem really optimistic that they can make this work in the next 8 days. Might be sooner, but I think they lock in there, and I think he ends up staying. The biggest obstacle for them has been structure and bonus money and how that's going to look and all that stuff. And fine, we'll give you X amount in bonuses now, but we want, or not now, but throughout the course of the deal, or you got to take less. Well, okay, we'll do that, but we want it. All of this kind of factors in. But long story short, I think he stays in Nashville.
I don't know if you saw that the side note, by the way, on the chicken front, there's a little bit of possible motion between Columbus and Arizona.
Okay.
So yeah, well, just, something to keep an eye on.
The Blue Jackets, and I'm seeing that now as well here. The Blue Jackets, have been looking to recreate that top blue line pair since they traded Seth Jones.
Right.
Now, I'm trying to remember if Werenski is a left shot D.
I think he's a right defenseman.
He is right. Okay, so then obviously Chychrun on the left side.
Yeah,
that helps to recreate that. They've been very active. This is another stealth team going, like Anaheim was the other one. This has been another one that's been looking and trying to see, how they can improve their club immediately. Mm-hmm. And with Chychrun, it is controllable. 3 more years on his deal. Hell of a great cap hit. I'm curious what the heck they could package up here to make something work that fits for the Arizona Coyotes.
Yeah, you'd have to think that they would start with like a Cole Sillinger or a
right.
Chinnikov.
Kent Johnson,
yeah.
Kind of part of that mix. If it's defense, maybe Adam Boquist, even though he's a right shot D, maybe that kind of factors in. But see, these are the types of moves that really hype up draft week. Mm-hmm. Like if it ends up coming to fruition and it ends up happening, these are the types of moves that everybody gets a little extra excited about, and then we want more. Yep. And from our perspective, I want more. But we'll see kind of how that unfolds. And if they do pull that off, does that entice Patrick Laine to sign long term?
Yeah.
With this club, does it attract other free agents? That's an interesting one, certainly.
All right, getting back to the free agent talk, I was thinking about, and he's not linked or anything, and I was just wondering if if the Florida Panthers don't figure this out and Colorado decides they don't want to try and circle back to this player, do the Islanders take a chance on Claude Giroux? Is he a guy that might fit for the Islanders if they miss out on a DeBrincat, a Miller, a surefire upgrade up forward? Via free agents, if Gaudreau decides to move on from Calgary and go somewhere else, is Giroux a possibility for the Islanders?
I'd be surprised if he ends up anywhere near another Metro team. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just to be direct, I don't see that really working out, and I would be very surprised if he ends up there. I'd be surprised, quite frankly, if he goes back to Philly. I think that chapter is closed. Don't see Pittsburgh. I think we're going to see other teams that kind of come into that mix. Florida would like to create some cap room to try to keep them. I don't know if they get there. You mentioned Colorado. I can see Carolina certainly circling on him. We know that Edmonton is a team that he would consider. Toronto to a certain extent, but they got to figure out their cap situation. I just don't see another team that kind of slots into that Metro that would be a fit for him.
Thinking about the situation that just went down in Tampa Bay, McDonough's gone. He goes to Nashville in exchange for 2 players. That kind of creates the cap space for them to keep Andre Palat, correct?
It helps. Yeah, they're going to likely figure out another way to either get an LTIR guy or kind of grind it out in another fashion. But they don't have a ton of space. I think they've got under 5 million right now with overage. Like right now, they're over the cap. You factor in even with the McDonough deal. Then you factor in the 6.875 million of Seabrook. So they're in and around, I think, or just over 5 or around 5 million. That might be enough to keep Palat and Ruda, maybe. Now that I'm saying it out loud, probably not. But does that they're either going to find that solution or they're going to have to move somebody else out. Mm-hmm. Alex Killorn's name has popped in and out. I know he would be devastated. He does not want to leave Tampa. He has some no trade protection. I can't remember how many teams on his list. But, I know that the player, he definitely wants to stay. That would be another last resort kind of situation for Julien Brisebois and the Lightning to pull off. But those talks with Palat and with Ruda, I believe, have started this week. So, I mean, we'll obviously wait and see if they can make something work.
What was the connection to the Islanders and Andre Palat, if any?
Well, I mean, if he hits the open market, it's a prime target for teams that are looking to bring in a top 6 guy. He goes to the top of the list for a lot of teams. The Isles, Toronto, the Rangers, if they can't pull something else like that off. Vancouver, to an extent. Edmonton is another team. Calgary may have to take a look there if things don't work out favorably with Gaudreau. The LA Kings were kind of tinkering with that. They got Fiala, so that's probably not somebody they're going to target now. But basically the teams that have some holes, Dallas, going back to the Stars, looking for a top 6 winger. He hits the open market. They will be a team that I would be shocked if they don't pursue Andre Palat. So all of these teams that are either in contender status or feel they're in contender status, they all have Andre Palat on their radar.
Nino Niederreiter. This one tickled a lot of Islander fans' fancies for the history of it. And it was a surprise to see him linked to the Islanders. If he were to get to free agency, I don't know if you get the sense that he will. Is that something that can come to fruition? And if it does, is he the offensive upgrade they're looking for, or is that like a middle 6 kind of thing? What's going on with Nino Niederreiter?
I think that's kind of a mid-6 possibility. I know the first season and a half, whatever it was, of his career, could have gone better. But he's performed well. He's got a bunch of 20-plus goal seasons under his belt. I think he just scored 24 last season, this past season. He will test the market. He will go to free agency this summer or in 8 days, and they're gonna weigh their options. But from my understanding internally, they've looked at teams that could be a fit that need that type of a player, and it sounds like the Owls are one of them from what we've been hearing. So, I mean, we'll wait and see. There are going to be a lot of teams that are going to be linked to a lot of players. Some of them just need one. It's just a matter of your options. You're doing your due diligence. They're doing their due diligence as well. So, could it be a fit? It's not the prime first line guy that they're looking for. So this may be a, plan B or C or D even, depending on what side you're on. But, if push comes to shove, it's much easier and more acceptable for a team to sign a free agent than cough up an asset to bring in somebody to fill a void.
So it sounds like there's not a ton of wiggle room for the Islanders, right? They are pretty cap strapped if you think about it. They have 12 million to work with. They have to sign Dobson. They have a few other needs. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that the Islanders might think of, or the Islanders might be doing this summer? Just because you look down the line of everything we just spoke about in
Yeah.
terms of upgrades. They want to do it, but it doesn't sound like necessarily any of the people who we spoke about in this episode are sure things. Is there anything we haven't touched on that could happen?
Yeah, I mean, look, in this business, sure things are dangerous to suggest. So that's why I try to keep everything open, because what may be true right now can change in an hour.
Sure.
And that goes for any team and any kind of information that we get. I think there's going to be a lot of exploring. If there hasn't been already, at least started from the outside of things. And one of the reasons I say that is, I know from the top down, this team wants to compete. They feel that their previous 2 seasons, they're almost there. Raw end this season, everybody gets it. I understand it. Other people in the league get it. Schedule, COVID, just like a perfect storm of crap that kept piling up for this team. So I get it. But they still believe the window is there. And if they can add a couple additional pieces, you make the coaching change, you bring in some really smart individuals to assist Lambert, as well as in assistant roles that were announced today. You really solidify your staff. Now it's a matter of bringing in some additional pieces. So they will try to look at any option to make that happen. And I believe it's Lou's final year of his contract. So you've got to think there's a little bit of urgency on his side as well to make sure this team can compete for a playoff position rather, this coming season. Or, I mean, who knows what's going to happen at that point, but it's a little extra motivator, I would imagine, selfishly for him, and I don't blame him, to make sure that this team is positioned as best it can to compete this coming season.
Right, yeah, because, two things here. One, I don't imagine that Lamoriello, although 80 years old, has any intention of wanting to slow down and maybe take a back seat and stop doing this.
No.
But two, UBS Arena is brand new. They want to put asses in seats,
Yes.
and they need to put on an on-ice product that excites the fan base in order to do so.
Yep.
So, final thoughts. Yay or nay, something happens that's somewhat significant for the Islanders this offseason?
If I had to guess, well, I know they want to.
They need to.
They need
That's,
right.
That's like not even the question. It's Lou needs to make an impact move. They can't.
Right.
He's made a lot of moves in the past that were, oh, okay, I wouldn't have thought of that. Let's see how it shakes out.
Right.
It needs to be different this time around.
I agree with you. I hate putting any kind of yay or nay or percentage because, again, I'm not running the team. I have no idea. Like, I'm not the guy calling the shots. If it were up to me, I'd try to do it. I know they're trying. It's really a matter of coming down to actually pulling the trigger on something. I know they want to. I think they should. I think a lot of people agree with us, and with you, John, as well, that they need to. Whether he can pull it off or not, I don't know. But I know they want to. So take that for what it's worth.
And that's about it. I think that was all we got for you today, Dave. We thank you for joining the show.
Absolutely.
Have fun at the draft. Have fun in Montreal. Happy you made it. I know the travel situation has been kind of crazy. You told me you drove down.
I did. Yeah, I did not want to deal with the airlines and the airports, and it's a what show up here with travel lately, and at least on a flight side of things. So a 5-hour drive from Toronto, I guess a little more than that. I'll take that. So
yeah.
I'm in. I'm here. I'm ready to go. I'm excited for the draft week, and I want to see some. I want to see some big moves. So,
yeah.
Lou, figure it out.
Absolutely. All right. Well, once again, David Pagnotta of the Fourth Period NHL Network, and all over Twitter. Make sure you follow him, and be sure to check out everything the Fourth Period's been putting out lately regarding summer trade lists and free agent watch. Dave, once again, thank you for joining us, and we'll have you on again, hopefully, in the near future.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks, Dave.
The action never ends at DraftKings Sportsbook, especially this summer. With tons of ways to bet on all your favorite sports, you can fuel your fandom and feel the heat of the season like never before. Plus, right now, DraftKings Sportsbook is giving new customers a risk-free bet up to $1,000. That's right, Make your first bet up to $1,000, and if it doesn't win, you'll get another shot to cash in. You can throw down on all major action for baseball, golf, MMA, and more. Plus, with same game parlays, spreads, money lines, over-unders, and props, your betting options feel endless. Best of all, DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. You can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now, use promo code THPN, make your first deposit, and get a risk-free bet up to $1,000. That's promo code THPN, only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details.
We want to say thanks so much to having Dave Pagnotta on with us again, a returning guest. And we feel quite fortunate to be able to have him on more than once now at this point.
Yeah, it was like we said before, it was a great interview. Anything surprise you? I have a couple of things. I'm curious what surprised you the most from what he said.
Yeah, I guess the most surprising thing to me was him talking about the draft pick, the 13th overall.
Yes.
I was under the impression that it was going to be gone no
It
matter
had to have
what.
been. Like as an
And
asset, how is it not?
yeah, and Dave came out and said, I would not be surprised if they use it to make a selection. So
That's great. I mean, this thing is, as far as I was concerned, had a 20 pin to its chest at the bus stop and it was just waiting for it to, you know what I mean? Like it was there's no way they were keeping it. It
yeah.
just didn't seem possible. And I think, kind of going off of that, it just kind of means that the moves we're expecting and the moves that, as even, I mentioned on the show with Dave and he agreed, they need to do something. That pick needs to be part of it. Right. And if it's not, the quality of the player in return, unless something, Devin Taves was had for cheap. If maybe can Lou pull off something similar, I don't know. If he can keep the pick and get the trades done and signings done that he needs to, and we're all, half of us are satisfied, we all won't be satisfied. Which is expected. Not everyone's going to love every single move. Some people will say Gaudreau, that contract's ridiculous. Some people are going to be falling over themselves. Some people are going to say, call me in 3 years. I'm in that camp. Call me in 3 years when his play drops off and you have that cap hit. So that part, and then essentially kind of near the end of the interview, him saying that he's not really sure what or if the Islanders are going to do anything. In a big way. And you had asked that question. That wasn't surprising so much as it was scary. And then, so coupling that with a really kind of bookending the interview, and some, obviously some interesting things in between, but those two things together, bookending things, was scary and surprising to me. I don't really know where to go with it.
Yeah,
After that,
I think the biggest takeaway, look, obviously, we report things as we hear them, right? But something that Dave continued to reiterate, and that I don't think, a lot of people understand, is that what we report that could be true today is not true tomorrow. These things change so fast. You look at some of the trades that go on around the league. Sometimes those things happen on a whim. Other times you know, they take a while to get there, right? Look at the Jacob Chikrin thing. He had a 20 pinned on his chest at the trade deadline in February, right? And it was
right,
this guy is gone. Well, it's July. He's still a member of the Coyotes. Now, albeit there's talks that he could possibly be on the move right now, but that's how many months later. And then you look at, the JG Pajot thing a couple years ago, like you like to talk about all the time. There was no indication until there was. And
Right.
suddenly it happened right away. So these things are changing so often. And, again, what we talk about today could be completely false tomorrow. And it's just important to remember that, right? These things change all the time. So that was one important takeaway. The other important takeaway I wanted to express was, oh man, I just had it and it left my freaking tongue. And I can't remember what it was. There was another takeaway I had and it's gone.
And I think that's all right. There weren't a lot of surprising things. And to your point about the the reports, and one thing being right today and changing tomorrow is where they're getting the information from and at what point. So if it could be like, yeah, Vancouver called about Josh Bailey and that
Yeah.
was it. That doesn't mean anything, other than, yeah, there was interest, or all we're hearing is Arizona was interested in an Islanders forward. We can figure out who that might be, but they could have called about anybody. They could have called about Nelson. I don't know what his trade protection is, if any. Like, you don't know what that could be, and I know it doesn't. That kind of thing doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But
Hmm.
this is, during this season, everyone's trying to get base value on certain things. They could call about Islanders can call about a player that's similar to Beauvillier. It doesn't mean they're interested in that player.
Right.
They could be just trying to gauge value around the league. So I think that's something to keep in mind as these reports come out. Why are they asking about this? They might not be interested in that way. It's not just purely can they trade or sign for this player. They're probably trying to gauge the value. They may also be interested, depending on who it is. I was a little surprised to hear about his interest in Palat for the Islanders and how that might be a fit. He was one of my players that I really think the Islanders should stay away from. He's kind of over the hump. He's going to be
Yeah.
way overpaid for what's ultimately going to be his production moving forward. Even if it stays the same, he's going to be overpaid for that production. Now, if they want someone to stick around at $4 or $5 million and perform in the playoffs, I say you keep Beauvillier.
And I'm with you there. I don't know if that's one of those things where he'd be. I mean, it would be because he's a UFA, right? It'd be in addition to. So maybe you're looking at like a Kyle Palmieri taking a bump down. I
I think he's
just,
already pretty much destined for the third line as it is. I see the Parise,
yeah,
Peugeot, Palmieri line as kind of a given at this point.
you hope so, right? Because you hope something's going to happen that pushes that depth chart down that way. We'll see. But
Beauvillier in that top line, Beauvillier, Barzal, and X would be ideal. I
I
think
agree with
I
you.
had seen some things around that. That's the intention. If the Islanders do not need to trade a Beauvillier,
Right.
they won't. Now,
Right. Well, the preference.
varying degrees of truth to that, we'll actually see in a week or two, or a week, 8 days, whatever, if that's ultimately what winds up being the case. But that gives them one less player to go get. And as we've discussed before, Beauvillier, Barzal, and X, whomever, it's not going to be a Fiala. It sounds like it's not going to be a DeBrincat. Gaudreau's still on the fence. I'm not really sure what else is really out there at this point that's worth it in that top tier. But whomever it is, which one of those I should use, it that's Beauvillier really should be able to pop off after that. So I'd be willing to bet on him.
I would be willing to bet on him too.
It's just an assets thing at this point, and that's
Yeah.
the hard part. And if you are gonna pick at number 13, if you're Lamoriello, Beauvillier has to be on the table, or at least if you're not going to trade that pick, and that's going to be part of the assets, that means free agency really must be the route. But as Dave pointed out, defensively, what does that mean? Now, that could mean Beauvillier for done, hockey trade over, sign a free agent, you're in good shape. Bailey cap dump for some assets, something for some trade deadline acquisition that they hold on to, and Varlamov for something, and that's it. Or they keep Varlamov and they're able to keep, make the money work, whatever the
Yeah.
deal is. That could be it. It may be Bailey, Varlamov for assets, Beauvillier straight up for done. I'm making things up. And a free agent signing done. Right? That might be just be 4 moves, and the free agent signing is ultimately the big thing. Although the done
Yeah.
deal would, I think, done for Beauvillier would be pretty big. And that's it. You're going to bet on Wahlstrom stepping up. It sounds, you'd be inserting Bellows because you'd be kind of down a forward at that point, or down 2 forwards. So maybe there's another free agent signing or smaller trade that happens for the top 6. So there's, there could be 3 or 4 moves, or maybe a 5th move that happens just to kind of work that out. Leddy going back to the Islanders, we've talked about how that would be good for Robin Salo mentorship.
Yeah.
I personally don't think that Islanders are in bringing in a mentor defender territory at this point, as far as an everyday defenseman. Of all of them, Nick Leddy wouldn't hurt my heart the most. That would be okay. I'd be able to stomach that the most, but it's not great. That just cannot be. That's not the former Blue you're looking for. The former Blue you're looking for is Vince Dunn. So I
These are
think
not the droids you're looking for.
these are not the it was the little hands.
These are not the droids you're looking
for. My one little nerd moment. But so I think if the Leddy thing happens, that's purely a dollars and cents thing, and because they threw the bag at somebody else forward, and they just couldn't afford a Vince Dunn, even if they got rid of Beauvillier, like whatever the deal was, something happened. They decide they want to keep Bailey on that second line, which was successful with Lee, Nelson, and Bailey.
Yeah,
I think that makes a ton of sense. So there's kind of some things like it'll be kind of a rock going downhill kind of thing. It's going to build momentum. A couple of things are going to happen one right after another.
So what was speaking back to what the surprising things that came out of the interview were, what was the most surprising thing for you?
I mean, I think I named, like, at the end him Dave saying, "Oh, I'm not really sure what or if they're going to do anything," and I was like, "Yeesh." The 13th overall pick thing was a big, like, ooh, I don't know. I think some of the surprising things, and maybe it really shouldn't be, was really like the price tag attached to DeBrincat. Obviously that was going to be high. I don't really know if it would have been worth it for the Islanders. I'd say go for it anyway. It's a 24-year-old that scores 40 plus goals a season. Pretty much, you can set your clock to it. Hearing the Jacob Chikrin information that it was likely just as high, I could also understand that given his age and what he's able to do. In that case, I feel like the Islanders do have what maybe Arizona's looking for between my ears, not actually what they're looking for. That the Islanders could at least put a package together that would make sense. Getting a Beauvillier or a Bailey on the roster. And I've seen both, like in just like people putting together trade packages, like Beauvillier, Bailey, X and X for Chikrin. I'm like, I mean, I get what you're trying to do in dumping money, but that cannot be necessarily what Arizona's looking for. I think Bailey does make less cash than his cap.
His cash will be $3.5 million this year.
So that could be attractive to an Arizona who will not make any money this year.
Correct.
So and that's 2 more seasons of that. That could make some sense. But as far as value for Chikrin, that doesn't add up. If you're Arizona, ideally you're not moving Chikrin, right? Like, he's really good. I don't really know why rebuilding teams do this. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
They have all the picks in the world right now. They have all the cap room in the world right now. I'm not really sure why you're moving Chikrin. Maybe that's why the ask is so high, because you don't really
that's exactly it.
to move them. So ask for the moon. It really doesn't matter. If no one does it, you have Jacob Chikrin.
Right.
And that's not
if a team does do it, it almost accelerates your rebuild because you're getting multiple assets that you can use for the future.
Right. And I think, don't confuse. And I think that's why it's important to get the, as much information about what the possible price tags are about these players are, like, as close to the draft or right after the draft as possible, is because it really tempers your expectations. Because it's going to be easy to say, I can't believe Lou didn't do whatever he didn't do. We're going to have to remember these types of things and go back into the last kind of like the beginning of July, late June, go through all those tweets and say, well, yeah, these are the price tags. Lou didn't want to pay that. Could you blame him? You can not like that he didn't do stuff, but understanding why, I think, is really important.
Yeah.
That's where you're disagreeing on the stuff. All right, he didn't do it because it was this package. Oh, I think he could have done. I think that would have been worth it. That's when it's a do you trust Lou, do you not trust Lou kind of conversation. But I think that's where that things can get kind of snagged in how we're discussing these things.
Yeah.
There's always going to be a reason why he didn't do something. So I think it's just very it's tough to kind of judge it right now. But hearing those packages and you go, yeah, I can understand why he doesn't go for DeBrincat. You can't then say, I can't believe he didn't get DeBrincat afterwards, right? Like that's
True.
not the same thing. So you kind of have to remove him from that conversation. If Chikrin's in the same boat, I don't know. I'd argue that that's even more of a need than DeBrincat.
Yep.
Is that
I'm
worth
with
it?
you on that one.
I don't know. Chikrin is definitely more of a first pair guy. With Dobson, that's definitely the future first pair for the Islanders. Even with Pelech and Pulak on the team, just switching places. They move from first to second pair. Dobson, Chikrin move up. If Vin's done, if you can get a deal done for him, is that a future first pair? I don't think so. I don't think that Dobson Dunn is a good first pair. Is Dobson a future first pair defenseman? Yes. Okay, so you figured that out.
I mean, it's as simple as being able to swap Pollock and Dobson. Now you have Dunn playing with Pollock on the second pair, and you have Dobson playing with Pelech on the first. There's your first pair.
It could be, hear me out. Maybe Mayfield doesn't come back after this season. Dunn becomes a third pair guy. And you're there's a lot of scenarios. You move players around. My point is the conversation doesn't need to be like, oh, Dunn or Chikrin. It's okay. He can make a deal for Dunn, and that's something that can get finished and completed. And it gets maybe a player off your roster that costs a lot of money in your forward group. It does create a hole, but your top four is solidified for 2 or 3 years. You don't, we could just not worry about it. That's totally fine. Then you then you can move to the forward group and say, okay, there are UFAs available. There's even second tier UFAs that, a Mikheyev. Like I said, that's a perfectly good addition. Now, I think he's going to be expensive. You're pretty much replacing the dollars that Beauvillier in that $4 to $5 million range. That's some, I don't know if it was a Friedman, but it was one of those types that were talking about what Mikheyev could make. All right, so maybe that's not the greatest deal. At 3.5, 4, maybe over 4, you're essentially replacing Beauvillier, and he's older. I can understand those arguments. Definitely an under the radar pick. If you can move Bailey and Beauvillier, maybe you bring in a Mikheyev. I don't know. Maybe you move Lee back up to the first line. McCabe, your second line winger with Nelson and Wahlstrom. I don't hate that. I don't hate that one bit, depending on who that UFA forward is that he brings in or trades for. So it's definitely there's a lot of moving parts. And I think that's kind of the problem right now with dissecting what Luke could do, is that there are so many options. And not so many options like there are tons of D and there are tons of forwards, but there's a lot of scenarios. If he does X, then he has to do Y. If he picks at number 13, you're talking about a hockey trade for a defender, and you're talking about a UFA forward. That to me, that's the line of thinking. If he trades the 13th pick, it kind of depends on what he's going for.
Yeah.
Was it for a forward or was it for a defender? Then you can kind of finish that train of thought. So and that's really 2 scenarios. So we're kind of working on 3 different things here. If I had to guess, now thinking through why Dave might have said that, because we didn't really get into it. Why would Dave say that that the 13th pick's not on the table? Well, you don't have to be an insider to have heard Lou multiple times say hockey trades. Okay. That kind of leads you down a certain path. They might pick at number 13.
Yeah.
The second pair of defensemen that everyone's looking for could be in Vince Dunn territory, whatever that means, whatever the other Vince Dunn equivalent could be that might want a Beauvillier.
Yeah.
That's not impossible. That's a hockey trade. and then a UFA signing for a forward. That all depending on who's available. Now, I think that's what Lou is kind of going off of right now. So my prediction is that they trade for the defender. Don't know who that might be. Beauvillier has to be part of it. It doesn't need to be coupled with that first round pick. It could be that hockey trade. I'll put my, so there's 2 days, it's going to be actually a day before the draft. So I'll put my DraftKings $5 on Beauvillier for a defender. Straight up. Maybe a pick or two, not a first round type thing. Beauvillier in a third for a Vince Dunn and a fourth. I don't know. Something like that. Like a hockey trade.
Yeah, you could say it.
I'll stick with Dave on picking 13th. I think that's fine. The UFA forward, I think, is the biggest question mark. I could absolutely see Gaudreau just staying in with Calgary.
Sure.
I could see Forsberg just getting way too much money somewhere else. The one-time 40 goals guy, and he could
stay in Nashville,
or he could stay in Nashville. After that is the crazy part, right? So taking a step back to the draft, that's where Lou's making the decision. If he's not seeing the UFA market play out, because what he's hearing, which is likely a lot more than even the insiders obviously are hearing, what he's hearing is the UFAs are likely going to stay put. That first tier UFAs is going to stay put, or at least the ones he's interested in. He could be interested in one or the other of Gaudreau and Forsberg for whatever reason, fit in the locker room, what they might be asking, what he's hearing could be like that. So if he's hearing that the UFA market isn't going to be, as far as that first tier winger is going to be available, he's using that 13th overall pick for a forward in a package, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. I don't know what that looks like. If he doesn't trade that pick, he picks at number 13. I'm sticking with my Beauvillier for a defender. If he does that, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but Lamoriello feels he can make a UFA happen. He's confident he can do that. He doesn't need a 13th overall pick for the trade. He knows it can be Beauvillier for X. I'm still going to call it done. I think that's the smartest move. Letty is the char of this year, albeit a better option than that.
You hope that you can get him and rope him in for the third pair.
Yeah, if he plays in a role with Salo and Mayfield, and I've said that before, I think that's perfectly fine if you can get him really, really cheap. If you don't have the cap room, you don't need to do it. I'm comfortable with Salo. I'll stick with Mitch on. He's an everyday NHLer. Just go for it. Him and Mayfield. If you're getting a second pair defenseman in, because we never really dissected the Mitch interview either. We were just kind of in that conversation. If Mitch is saying he's comfortable, I'm going to hitch my wagon to that. I feel comfortable with it all day. To say Salo, Mayfield, X, Dobson, Pulak, that's fine. If they can't get that, if the Beauvillier thing falls through, as far as the trade for a defenseman is concerned, they have to go with a Letty. And there's a Salo. That's good for the mentorship thing. I still don't love it. That's, like I said before, that's not a thing that's going to make my heart happy. That's not going to give me a ton of confidence. Is it the worst thing? There's probably worse options. That's Lamoriello's worst case scenario, is that you have to go for that. Whatever. But if Lou holds on to the 13th pick, Beauvillier and the trade for a defender happens, he must be confident that he can get a UFA forward.
I guess we'll see.
I think that's. I don't really make those predictions, but I think you're just kind of, you have to pick a scenario. That's a scenario I could see happening. Now, if he doesn't, we'll know if he chooses number 13, right? We know in real time if he chooses that pick. Then you kind of figure out things from there. If he trades it, we'll know what he traded it for, and then you can kind of say, okay, John was wrong. Beauvillier wasn't for the defender. The 13th overall pick was for the defender in a package deal, yada, yada, yada. That scenario is just broken. My prediction is off immediately. But that's if they trade the 13th pick, it's for what? And who's included in that? And that's where it's a complete toss-up.
It would have to be part of a deal that is going to, again, help improve the immediate roster.
Right, and that's where you don't know what Lamoriello is thinking. Is he confident that he can get that UFA, or does he need to trade for a forward? There aren't a ton of UFA options for left shot defensemen, as Dave said.
Right.
We've said it before. So that's where I think firmly that's the hockey trade we're looking for.
Yeah.
That is the trade we're looking for. It's the 13th pick situation. If he doesn't feel there's the UFA option, you have to think he's dealing that pick for a forward.
Yeah.
With an RFA or whatever. And that, again, that could be someone that we're not necessarily thinking. That up until the day, he was signing with X team as an RFA. No one questioned it until they did.
Right.
And Lamoriello made the deal. That's kind of where my head's at. Everything goes based off of what happens with the draft. Then you can start playing with scenarios.
Yeah.
So that to me, it could be draft day that they make the hockey trade too.
Right.
So everything goes based off of what happens.
It could be Friday in rounds 2 through 7.
Oh, it could happen during the draft, but we'll know more based on what happens with the 13th pick.
Yeah. I definitely was a little shocked at the fact that he had said, like, don't be surprised. The other thing that shocked me a little bit too was, we ran down the line and we spoke about who everyone's talking about in terms of who's available, who the Islanders can get. It sounds like everyone aside from Johnny Gaudreau or Nino Niederreiter aren't going to happen. So in more basic terms, Johnny Gaudreau is possible, maybe not like, I don't know, if you're going to put a number on it, it's like 40% possible at this point, maybe. Because, he listed the things that Johnny Gaudreau's looking for, and all of that kind of does point to Long Island. Calgary too. And he has stated that, Calgary has all those things that he was listing. But if he makes it to UFA, the Islanders will try to lure him in, maybe not at the number he's looking for, right? He said Lamoriello's not going to throw a bag at him the same way he did Panarin, which I found interesting. I think Gaudreau's the better player. However, I think I understand because of the age. Maybe that's a reason. But I think more surprising than that to me was the fact that it sounds like Nino Niederreiter, and again, this isn't saying that the Islanders are going to go all in on him, but it sounds like if anybody's the most possible, it's him.
That's crazy to me. I mean, is he the UFA prize?
No, and that's what he said, right? He said he's not your first line fix. That's more of like a middle six kind of thing.
So if you trade, that's your Mikheyev or Niederreiter or something like that.
Right.
That's definitely interesting. I didn't, I had some under the radar picks with the hockey writers. Niederreiter did not make that. I'm gonna try to pull it up really quick. Yeah, it was Mikheyev, Trocheck, Nichushkin. Did see some stuff on Nichushkin today with as far as the Avalanche were concerned. That I can't recall if it was that they were definitely close or they definitely weren't. Are they in between? Not entirely sure. But definitely like that's not nailed down in Colorado. The same thing for Sam Girard on D with Colorado.
Right.
Is that the option? Is that the now that won't be Beauvillier necessarily. That's where the 13th pick needs to come in with Colorado.
Right.
who's going to be, if they even own their 13th pick, their first round pick in this draft, which I don't have the cap friendly up, so I don't know off the top of my head, but that's interesting. This is a 13th and something get Sam Girard out of Colorado, and that's your pick. So that's not the hockey trade.
Yeah,
that's an option.
He's not quite Jacob Chikrin, but he's offensive defenseman, top 4 guy, and he's under control for I think the next 6 seasons at $5 million. Like it's a good contract. You're not overpaying that guy, and it's manageable.
Right. So no, that's not the hockey trade. That's available, but that's a draft night thing that kind of changes things. And again, if the 13th pick goes in a trade for a defenseman, who, regardless of whoever that is, again, Lamoriello is confident that he can get a UFA forward. He doesn't need the pick for that. So that's kind of I think that's an indication of where Lou's head is. Again, I don't know if that means it's Gaudreau or Forsberg. It could be somebody else that we're not thinking of that's not been connected to the Islanders at all. I don't know who that would be, but Malkin certainly doesn't make any sense. So that can't possibly be it. It's not Phil Kessel.
No.
It's obviously not Bergeron. Radulov is in the KHL.
I don't think no, not necessarily, but it's possible. I don't think he's going back to Dallas.
Yes, and he's 35. Insert joke here about Lamoriello wanting an old forward.
Yeah, seriously, get some new lines, please.
I mean, I guess like it's not.
Jokes.
Look, I'll say this: it's not true. Like there's some credence there, there's some evidence there, but yeah, whatever. Insert joke here. Again, I'd stay kind of clear of Palat. He's not your prized UFA. There is a Max Domi. There is a Burakovsky. That kind of depends on what happens in Colorado with players like Nichushkin. So it's not like there's not players available. And you have to think, and we've talked about this multiple times, so I can't point to a particular episode, but we've asked the question, what does the top line winger look like next to Barzal? That's where we kind of have to think. We do have to think outside the box. There are definitely the obvious choices. Barzal and Gaudreau would play well together. Small, speedy forwards, fine. Forsberg will find the back of the net. Barzal will have 90 assists and 11 goals, and it'd be amazing. The question is, though, would a Burakovsky just really mesh well with Barzal better than Gaudreau or Forsberg? So a Nichushkin or a Burakovsky, would one of those players mesh better with the Barzal? That's kind of the question. That's what Lamoriello is trying to figure out, and that's where we don't know that. There's obvious choices. There are high-powered forwards or wingers that we know, okay, they're two really good players. They have to play well together. I don't know that that's like you're going to nail that with 100% certainty every single time, but good chances. It's after that where it's the unlikely pairings. It's you don't know that Kadri's is just going to play well with the top 6 in Colorado. Yeah, he's a good player. It wasn't a given. Kane in Edmonton. Yeah, he's a good player. Anybody can play well next to McDavid. Didn't need to work though. So I think that's where we, Palmieri and Pagnotta, it didn't happen until it did, and then it worked. Okay, now you know. I wouldn't have said put them together. Palmier's not playing well. Stick him on the third line. That makes sense. But I wouldn't have said, oh, yeah, they'll definitely pop off together. That makes sense. I don't know. Lee and Nelson could have just not worked a second time, third time, whatever many times they've been split up and put back together, which maybe just keep them together. Seems to work. Leave it alone. Lee and Barzal fizzled out a little bit. Maybe figure that out. Be different. But that's the kind of thing where sometimes you got to think like almost like those old NHL games. I don't know about the new ones where they had like playmaker in this one. What kind of playmaker? Does he shoot the puck sometimes? How are they going to mesh together? I don't know. That's kind of the Lou Lamoriello kind of decision that only he can make. And then really only seeing it live in camp and in games is going to be like, this works or it doesn't work.
Right. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, for sure. It's just complicated. But I think Dave put that kind of seed of doubt in my head. And now that 13th pick situation is really going to hinge everything. I think I think if they pick that pick, we know what scenario is going to happen by and large. Hockey trade for a forward or a defenseman, and someone's coming out of UFA. My money is that it's the defenseman that's the hockey trade, and the UFA is the forward, just based on who's available.
Yeah.
But we'll see. It's exciting, scary. I'm sure we'll get a surprise in there. Something might sneak up. Like you said, it could be on Friday, could be in the later rounds.
Sure.
But that pick is there could be that could be the most important pick or non-pick for the Islanders since Tavares.
Whoa.
Choosing this, I mean, the player that's picked is not going to make the impact that Tavares did.
Sure.
Put that right out there. But picking that person, picking whoever this is going to have a ripple. That means that, it couldn't be used in a trade. So they decided to pick. That's a monumental. That's a big deal. And if they trade it, who is it for? And what kind of impact are they going to make? I think a lot hinges on things that are going to happen at the draft, one way or another.
Definitely.
But I think this is like, I don't know that there was a more like Barzal, that kind of like, that was a bunch of trades, yada, yada, yada. You get Barzal. You have a Dobson. But when thinking back to like, Tavares was a franchise player. Barzal's turned into that. He was always going to be really good, but I don't think we were thinking about Barzal and Tavares in the same conversation. It wasn't wasn't a generational talent. Like that wasn't a Tavares can change the course of your franchise type thing. Like that was not happening with Barzal necessarily.
There was a point in his pre-draft year where Barzal was spoken about as neck and neck with McDavid. An injury that year really lowered him down to where he was drafted. But looking back on it, he probably should have been top 10.
Yeah, and that's fine. What I mean is, as far as the importance for the Islanders as a franchise, it's probably been since 2009 where a draft could really make an impact, or at least potentially make the impact. Again, we won't, if they choose it, we'll only know after if it was worth making that pick.
Yeah.
If they don't, we'll know immediately what's going to happen after that or what needs to happen after that.
Yeah.
They traded for a forward. Okay. Must be trading for a defenseman. They use it in a trade for defense, and the opposite. Okay, we know what the other thing's going to be. So I don't think I've been like, and the Tavares thing was very different too, because who are they going to pick? Hedman or Tavares? That's a different kind of nervous. This is my whole summer could be ruined because something does or doesn't happen. And the thing is, you don't even know if it's good or bad until after. We won't even know for another week if they picked or didn't pick and if that was a good choice or not, based on what they're able to do right after that. So it's complicated.
We'll surely have a lot to talk about in episode 116 next week.
Episode 2 of season 4.
Episode 2.
This is the kickoff for season 4.
Yes,
new graphics, new look. I'm
loving this new aesthetic, by the way. I'm loving the new logo. This whole simplistic thing we got going on here, loving it.
Your brother did the logo.
He did
for us. This is also our second logo
from him,
this is great. Yeah, I kind of got a little inspiration from the Islanders' third jersey, the retro, the whatever, the reverse retro. I love that blue. This should have been the 30th, the 20th anniversary of the 2001-2002 team, but I think that's this upcoming season. So maybe expect Sean Bates to return or somebody cool. I don't know. I'm making things up. I've been watching highlights from that season. Like there's somebody, I can't remember the name of the channel. Someone like uploaded it by month.
Yeah.
Like October, November, December. There's an all access show that apparently was filmed that year. Don't know where it was aired. So I'm like kind of going through that.
Interesting.
Like, yeah, for the Islanders, Peter Laviolette's first season, all that kind of stuff. It's interesting. So I kind of I think I just had that in my head.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I like that. I missed that color scheme. I like that. I like that darker scheme, that early 2000s kind of thing, post Aqua Fresh Islander logo. So post Fisherman, but not all the way post Fisherman. I like that aesthetic. It's nostalgic for me anyway. Yeah, it's fresh. It's crisp. It's
fresh and so clean.
Yeah. Another early 2000 throwback. With the song there. So yeah, I love it. So we kicked off season 4. Tried to line it up for free agency, but we figured having Dave on beginning of season 4 was good.
I always think of July 1st as a new season for hockey.
You did kind of strong arm me there.
Yes.
No. July 1st episode.
July 1st is always going to be, I think, the new season for us.
I don't know what we did in the past because we had 3 seasons of the show in 2 years. And this was the closest we've been to a normal season. And so yeah, that we can do that. The first day of free agency this year is close. It works. Moving forward, we'll just kind of leave it.
Yeah.
It'll be fine.
I think that wraps it up for this week, pal.
Oh, it needs to be.
This was a long one.
Yeah, it was a long one. Starving. So I had to leave to watch the whole thing. I had to leave for a second in the interview because I was like, oh, because you're like, oh, we'll have it'd be like a 30-40 minute thing. I was like, great. So at 6 o'clock before I sat down, started the oven timer. 40 minutes. So great. We're done in 35 minutes. We're usually pretty efficient with Dave. No problem. Thing is, it's 45 minutes in. My food's still in the oven. And the thing keeps beeping. So I can't say anything if I'm awfully quiet during the interview because I can't quite get the timing right of when the thing's going to beep. So I ask a few questions and it's because it just stopped beeping and there was an opportunity for me to say something.
Yeah.
So I unmute.
The sacrifices that we make.
So yeah, then eventually I was like, all right, I got to make sure this food's not burning.
Yeah.
So I'm going to scoot out really quick and I turn the oven off and everything. I assume the food's fine, but I'm not smelling any smoke, but that's why I'm a little quiet. And I randomly got up in the middle of the show.
Well,
slowly, because I sprained my knee last week.
What is going on with you?
I was playing kickball last week, as one does. I told you about that, right?
Yes.
So I was playing kickball last week.
Yes.
And, you got to make a good first impression. We were getting our asses kicked, so whatever. But you're up at bat, whatever. You're at the plate, and I'm like, I just want to crush this ball. Just this is for me. I don't care if you win. That's when I kick the ball as hard as I can. First 2 pitches, I foul it off. Don't really get a great piece of it. This third one, there's like a rule, 3 fouls and you're out, which is really annoying for kickball because you can just like hit the ball wrong a few times, and that's also not great. So the ball's like curving left a little bit. So I kind of like back up and try to reorient myself, and I'm just gonna give it. If it fouls off, it's gonna be a good kick. I'm just getting a piece of it. I wind up. It takes a weird hop right at the end.
Right.
And so I don't quite kick the ball all the way. I get a lot of air. And I must have just like hyperextended my knee or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't like, knee injuries are really weird. I'm like trying to look it up, like an ACL injury or this, and like I'm hobbling around. Takes a few days to recover. The other night, we're watching the fireworks on the boat. I go to just like turn a little bit.
Nope.
Tweaked it. Oh boy. Oh my God. Excruciating pain. We're like, the fireworks are going to start in 10 minutes, and then we got 40 minutes. That's like a 20-minute ride home. So I'm like just like in pain on the boat's moving around because it's in the water, and like every little bump, I'm wincing. So like it was like kind of recovered, and now it's just back to being really, really terrible. So we are gonna figure that out one way or another.
See a doctor.
Well, that's the thing. It got better today versus yesterday. So
Okay.
which is more of a sprain type thing, which just means I need to relax. So I was like, I don't need to go to a doctor for them to tell me like, take some leave, see ya in 3 months. Now, if it gets
Probably true.
worse and doesn't recover, yeah, okay. Different conversation. So yeah, I hobbled as fast as I could to the kitchen, turned off the oven. We didn't burn the house down. I didn't sprain my knee more. That's it.
Congrats. We're going to wrap it up now.
Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed our interview with Dave. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to or watch the show. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Nassman Hockey. You can find my work at the Fourth Period, John's work at the Hockey Writers. Make sure to check out Al's Fix. A little bit of a hiatus right now. When things pick up, you might get some surprises in your inbox. So subscribe. And until next time, everyone, let's go Islanders.